Hello, everyone, and welcome to That's My Opinion! My name is BaconBearzz, and that's my opinion. I am starting a podcast because I can talk for a very long time about nothing. And also, I don't know, it's just something that's always been on my bucket list, and it's something that I've always wanted to do. And I really enjoy connecting with people through content creation, comments, and reading things and sparking new ideas and new conversations. That's always been really exciting to me. I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro today. This isn't going to be the typical format of the show, but I find that it's important that you understand what we're doing with the podcast, where I plan on going, and a little bit about myself, why you're here, why we're here, and if you should stay here. So a little bit about the show. It's called It's My Opinion because it's going to be my opinion and hopefully others' opinions. I do have 2 microphones and 2 cameras, so it is my hope that I can get more than one person on the show beside myself, because even though I could listen to myself talk for hours, I'm sure it's going to be annoying. I annoy myself, so I get it. But I like having differing views. I like having different people. I kind of brought this idea to my friends last night, and I was like, I always feel kind of stupid because, okay, first of all, if you're going to get to know me, I am a Gemini with undiagnosed ADHD. Okay. So I always have these wildly grandiose ideas about all these things that I'm going to get done and all these things I'm going to do and all the places they're going to take me. And I find the smallest success with these things. And then I'm like, goals achieved. And, and I quit because as a Gemini, commitment phobe, I've only been able to commit to 2 things my whole life. And that's been my husband and my children, which the most important things. Okay. 2 for 2, I guess. I want to knock this off the list. I want to see if it works. I'm going to throw things kind of at the wall and see what works. But anyway, so I brought this idea to my friends last night and I was like, hey, I was thinking about starting a podcast. And I have these 2 friends in particular. They're a married couple who live right behind us. And, the last thing that you ever want to do is feed my delusions of grandeur, right? And so they happened to be in my house when I walked in yesterday, and I was like, all right, so here's my new idea. And I was like, I'm gonna start a podcast. And they were like, oh my God, we think that this is the best idea. You should totally do that. And then, of course, my ego's like, yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to take over the world. It's going to be great. And then I was like, for the woman, I was like, I can have you on. And then for the man, he plays a bunch of tabletop games and like does nerd shit. And I'm like, I can have you on. And then we could talk about all these like cool things and talk about nothing all at once. And they were like, yeah. And then, so that's the last thing that you want to do is like feed whatever idea it is that I have. But anyway, so that's my goal. My goal is to get interviewees on here. But I want to be able to talk about things that are top of mind. I talk about a lot of things on TikTok, that are quick off the top of my mind, and they're hot topics. But I would like to talk about those things in longer form, and just have a place where I can just kind of express myself and be free. Also talk about my family life, sort of limited, because I do think that it's important, especially in this age of social media, that there are a lot of things that should be private. So I want to just talk about, I just want to talk. I just want to have conversations, and hopefully this sparks conversations between, the comments, and we can all have chats, and we could talk about things that are important, things that aren't important, nonsense, whatever it may be. With that being said, I do have this being hosted on in 2 different formats. It will be in a video format on YouTube, and then it will be in an audio format on, I'm going through Spotify for podcasters, which I don't know, it was free. I don't know. I'm trying this out, and I cannot spend money on another hobby because I don't have any, okay? That's the thing about my ADHD friends will understand this, that, which, by the way, I talk about ADHD and being undiagnosed. It is my goal for 2023 to get a diagnosis. So my son is autistic, and I, going through all of the things that you do to get your children diagnosed and then evaluated and reevaluated, and all these things that you, forms that you fill out, like all of these things that you do. You start to look at them and you're like, I have this, I have this, I have this, I have this. And then you're like, wait. And I'm like, maybe I'm autistic. I don't know. But I think for the most part, ADHD would be a good start. So it is my goal to hook up with a doctor or a psychologist and just get evaluated. And whatever, if he's just like, no, you're kind of, this is just who you are and you don't have ADHD, then also, yeah. But I've had people who, do have ADHD or do have, different things going on. And they're like, hey, you also have this? And I'm like, I do. So anyways, back to the original point is that all of my people with ADHD who do hobbies or are crafters will understand that when you start a hobby, we can't just start a hobby. We can't just be like, you know what? I'm going to start crocheting. I'm going to get a needle and a cheap yarn. We don't get to do that. We have to go buy 1,000 needles and then the best yarn that has ever walked the face of the planet. And that's the problem, and I tell this to my husband all the time. It's because I think that I am a prodigy. And he's like, you can't be a 37-year-old prodigy. Why? How do you know I'm not the best crocheter that's ever existed in the whole entire world? Because I'm not, and that's my mother-in-law. But how do you know, right? I've never sat down in front of a pottery wheel. We don't know if I'm not the best pottery maker, right? What if I spin a bowl that's the best bowl you've ever seen in your whole life? Just it brings a tear, one single tear to your eye. We don't know. So anyways, I made this choice to do this podcast, and that was one of the deals that I made with myself is you can only do the podcast with things that you have in your arsenal right now. You can no longer further spend any more money on any more hobbies that aren't going to take you anywhere. So, there have been a lot of ideas that I've made minimal return, or I've at least made my money back, and then I never take it any further than that. But I digress. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a 37-year-old mother of two. I have a 6-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter. They are the best things to ever grace the face of the planet. And I have a 38-year-old husband. He just had a birthday here. And he is also the greatest. Him and I have been together for 10 years, 2012. How long have we been married? That I don't know. 2015. You do the math. I don't do math. I also don't count my marriage. Like, people are like, how long have you been married? Who cares? We've been together for 10 years. It's funny. I have friends who have been together for 9 years and they just got married. And I have friends who have been together for 7 years and then they got married. But if you're like, oh, we've been married for 10 years, but you've been together for 17, that's a long time. That's a really long time. People like discount, the marriage to relationship ratio, which has always been odd to me. When did you get married? I don't know. When did I start dating him and not break up with him? Because I think that's what counts. My husband is the only person that I've never broken up with, which says something. He's pretty cool. He can stay. But he's the only person that I've never broken up with or tried to get back together. And that was something really important going into this relationship. And I had told him, that was one of the things that I had told him on the first date. I was like, listen, I'm done playing these games, which is so funny because I said that with so much confidence, and it was always me playing the games because I was such a child before, meeting my husband. But I was like, whoa, dude, just so you know, to lay down all the rules, just so you know, you better not fuck with me. But I had just told him, I was like, listen, I'm just going to tell you this. If you break up with me, you're going to do it once. So choose your time wisely. But we actually talked a lot about things that, when they're like, don't ever talk about these things on your first date. We talked about all of them. We talked about his ex. We talked about my ex. We had talked about just, relationship stuff. And, I think it helped that I knew my husband for so much longer than when I started dating him. I've actually known my husband forever. But we've been in different social circles, and we never really talked. We said hi here and there, but it was never like, I don't think I had a conversation with him before I started playing softball, and we started playing softball together, and then we would talk here and there. And I remember this one. It's so funny because I don't know what it was. And I told him this story and he just like laughs. But there was one time that I was sitting in the dugout and I was like putting my socks and shoes on, and I had my bat bag next to me, and he comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, hun, do you mind putting my keys in your bag? I don't have anywhere to put them." And like the "hey, hun" like shot a chill in my body. And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" Like, excuse me. Because I always thought he was like so cute. Like he has just always been the cutest. And then fast forward like 10 years later and we start dating and I tell him this story and he's like, "Really?" And I'm like, yeah, that one thing like sticks with me. But anyway, so, we started playing softball. I was single at the time. He was breaking up with his girlfriend at the time. And we had just started talking a little more after he became single. It just kind of progressed from there, and then that was it. And then we've been together ever since. And we have 2 children, 2 wonderful children. I'll tell you a little bit about my older son. We call him Moose. That is his nickname, so that's what we will refer to him on the podcast. And Moose is 6 years old. He is on the autism spectrum disorder, on the spectrum. He has autism spectrum disorder. He is considered nonverbal. He is in a special education classroom, and he is the, greatest human being that I wish I could be. And it's so funny because I've learned so much from him. And he's never really spoken a word to me. So, it's funny, if you're listening, how much you can learn. But he's great. And, I won't harp too much on, that journey I'm sure in other podcasts we'll get to it, but just to give you guys a little insight about that. My daughter is 3. We call her Ray. She is something. If you guys know anything about 3-year-olds, boy, it's something. It's nothing I've ever experienced before. And here's the problem. My daughter is every quality that I would love in a woman. Like I would just see a woman with all of my daughter's, personality traits, and I would be like, yeah. She is strong. She is independent. She takes no prisoners. And she does not give a fuck who you are. And that's the thing is as a mother, I'm like, tone it down a notch. Could you? Like it's 7:45 on a Tuesday morning. Could you leave me alone? But at the same time, as the mother of a daughter, I'm like, go out there and just set fire to this world. I try to reinforce these personality traits, but also, I'm trying to teach her time and a place. It's a problem because you don't want to beat a child down so that they lose what makes them special, right? But at the same time, I'm like, what's the right response? She's also 3, right? She can't control her emotions. And I actually watched this child psychologist and on TikTok, and she had said, I think it's completely unfair that we require children to be in control of their emotions when at times we are incapable of doing that ourselves as adults. And I was like, fuck. All right. Okay. But she is something. And it's a very weird experience. She looks like me. She acts like me. She brings up memories of my childhood that I thought that I lost. And a lot of times when I'm parenting her, I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience. So her and I will be having an interaction. Maybe she's crying or maybe she's upset or she's angry. And I'm trying to enforce, some sort of discipline in this moment. And it's almost like the world stops. And I can step out of my body and be taken to a place where I can see me as that child and my mom standing in my shoes and almost be like, I have an opportunity to parent myself. Like, what did I need in this moment? And the only reason that I can do that is because my daughter is a carbon copy of me. 1000%. My daughter does something and I think about my mom and I'm like, sorry, you know? But it's hard. Parenting is hard. Parenting, the whole concept of parenting is ass. It's awful. And nobody tells you that either. Nobody tells you that, you know, you're going to feel guilty because you got their breakfast order wrong and somebody's crying because they asked for apples, but when you cut it up and you put it on their plate so nice and neat, they don't actually want the apples. And you, in that moment, you can't look at them and say, you're an illogical 3-year-old. You just look at yourself and you're like, God, I'm so stupid. How did I not know that you didn't want these apples after you asked for these apples? And then that shit will eat you up all day. All day it eats you up. And you're just like, I should have known about the goddamn apples. And you just feel guilty a lot. And all you're trying to do is you're trying to protect them in all aspects, right? You're trying to make sure that they don't get physically hurt. They don't get emotionally hurt. They don't get, you know, you just want them to be safe. And you're the one fucking it up most of the time, you know? It's just like, there's a lot of times I believe in God. And there's a lot of times that I lay in bed and I just pray. And I'm like, hey, big man, maybe a little bit more patience tomorrow. Sprinkle that. Sprinkle some before I get up. That would be nice. But yeah, parenting is hard. And people say, like, before you have children, they're like, do it. You're going to be so fulfilled. It's the greatest thing you'll ever do. You'll never love anything. And then I'm like, when? When is this fulfilling? Because this shit is hard. This shit is so hard. And no, and that's the thing is, like, you're just kind of guessing. You're guessing with somebody else's life. Like, I think that's the worst part of it. And then you get these people, because they're people, children are people, right? And you get these people who have needs and wants that are different from yours, and you're like, why? I know how to do this for me, but I don't know how to do this for you. And then they can't communicate to you what exactly that it is that they need. It's a mess. The whole thing's a mess. I will tell you, I've never loved anything more than having my children. That is true. I love them more than my husband. I love them more than myself. And that was a big deal because there was nobody who loved me more than me moving up, you know, except, and then I married my husband. He might have loved me more than I loved me. And I was like, this is great. The two of us just loving me. And I loved him. And we loved each other. And then we had children. And I'm like, what is happening? And then everybody's just drowning for the next 20 years trying to get it together. You know, and it's funny because you don't realize people talk about the ebbs and the flows of a marriage. I don't know what the good one is and what the bad one is. I've been in both of them. And then I've been in the neutral zone, you know, and it's different. There's so many things it's like an adult dodgeball game. You're just trying to dodge balls from all angles, you know, and it's difficult. It's very difficult. To tell you a little bit more background of myself, I am finding in my parenting journey that I do need to take care of myself, which is also one of the reasons that I started this podcast, because I do need to be able to sit down and do things that I enjoy, because that's important, because it is important to take care of yourself, and because my children deserve a happy mother, and because my husband deserves a happy wife, and I also just I'm deserving of happiness. And I didn't think that for a long time. And now I'm like going down to my basement to record something to put it on the internet because that's what makes me happy on a Sunday morning, you know? But we got to do those little things, you know? We got to do those little things for us. And it's important to recharge your batteries again because they get depleted. You're being touched all day by children and they need and they want and they, you know, and then you do these things. And you're like, all right, I've played with you in your dollhouse. I got to get off the floor because my back hurts. And then they flip over the dollhouse and burn your house down because they're mad because you're not playing in the dollhouse anymore. You know, they're wild. They're wild. Just living wild and free. They're like animals. I feel like my daughter sometimes. I feel like she's a person. Like those movies when they're like, we found this child in the woods. They've been raised by wolves. I feel like she could also be that. Because she's feral. You know? But anyway, so I'm really trying to find myself. The transitions that you go through is also such a mind fuck, right? Because in my 20s, I was finding who I was, right? And then about 25, I think I really started to figure out, right, who I was as a woman, who I wanted to be as a woman and as a person. I learned how to say no. I learned these, very powerful lessons that I think it's important, especially women learn. And hopefully I could teach my daughter far earlier than I ever knew them. I really found who I was, right? And then around 27, 28 is when I started dating my husband. And I made a promise to myself that I was going to lay down ground rules about what my next relationships look like. And I wasn't going to take any shit. And I wasn't going to take any prisoners. And I remember sitting at my first date with my husband. And I was like, listen, these are the rules. This is what I will accept from you. This is what I won't accept from you. I don't need you. I pay my own bills. I live in my own apartment. I have my own car. I have my own career. I need nothing from you except for pure entertainment. And he just looked at me and he was like, why shouldn't you have all these things? I was crazy. Like, I don't understand why you don't think you should have all these things. And I was like, you're coming with me for the rest of his life. That's actually not true. I'm sure in the beginning I tried to fuck it up because that's self-sabotage is my favorite thing. So then I found who I was with him and who we were as a couple, and that was exciting. And then we moved in together fairly quickly. I think 6 months after we started dating. I think I met him not met him, but we started dating at the end of August, the beginning of September. I moved in I believe May because he had a significant, well, all family members are significant, but he had a death in his family, I believe in April. It was April because it's our wedding anniversary. I forgot about that. But yes, he had a family member die in April, and then I moved in May, which is funny because if you would tell me this timeline for my own family or for like my own daughter, or like if you were a 27-year-old girl and you're like, it's 6 months and we moved in, I'd be like, why? But then I have to look at my own life and be like, we did it and it worked. And sometimes you just got to do it. My aunt married my uncle 6 months after she met him. They've been married for 30 years. It's funny too, because I got a little bit of cold feet before the wedding. And I remember calling my husband and crying. And I was like, what if we get divorced? What if this doesn't work out? And my husband, being this, I'm telling you these conversations and I'm laughing because you couldn't have put two further different people on a spectrum in a marriage. Like there's not two people further from each other. But anyway, so, I called him and I was like, what if this doesn't work out? And he had just said to me, that's okay. He said, we are making the best choice in the moment that we are in right now for us. And we're going to get married because that's what we want to do. He's like, you still want to do that? And I'm like, well, yeah, but what if? And he's like, we're not there yet. And he's like, if in 10 years it gets here, we talk about it then. In 25 years, in 30 years, in however many years. He goes, and we might be completely different people then, but we're not that now. And I was like, that is some profound ass shit. And then I married him and that was it. And here we are. So, so then I found out, so then I'm trying to find myself, right? And I'm finding out who I am as a married lady. And that was also one of the things that I told my husband when we first got married. I'm not having kids. I don't want kids. I never wanted kids. And I think most of the reason that I never wanted kids was because I raised my siblings. When I was 16 years old, my mom had twins, and she also owned a restaurant, and the twins very much became my babies. And in my house, that was just what you did. You lived there, you helped take care of babies. So I was with the twins a lot. And then I was 23 when my mom had my other sibling, my sister, and her and I are 23 years apart. Actually, it's funny because there's a bigger age difference between me and my youngest sister than there is between me and my mom. How's that for a mind fuck for you? It's always been a funny fact to me. And then, I was moving out on my own, and which I is unfortunate because I really do love my youngest sister. I don't share the same connection because I didn't live in the house with her as long as I did with my other siblings. But my youngest sister is great. Actually, my daughter reminds me a lot of my youngest sister. It's freaky almost, like mannerisms, the thing that she says, the things that she does. It's pretty wild. So anyway, so I told my husband, I was like, we're never going to have kids. I never want to have kids. I actually told him that on the first date. I was like, so if you want to like get married and have kids, I'm happy to get married. I'm happy to spend the rest of my life with somebody that I enjoy spending time with. But I'm never having children. And I remember him looking at me and he was like, you can do that? Like, that's an option? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, what would you do? And I'm like, whatever I want to do. I'm an adult with adult money and I have a job and I can do whatever it is that I want to do. And he was like, that sounds pretty fucking cool. So we should do that then. So we get married and we are in our first year of marriage. And I'm finding out sort of who I am as a wife, I guess. I don't think I really found out who I was as a wife until I had my kids. Because we were just in a relationship, right? Like I was just his partner. He was my partner. We did things for each other. And my love language is acts of service. So my love language is very much cooking someone dinner or doing something for them that they like. For example, my husband is very particular about the bed being made every day. So that was just something I started doing, because he likes it. But I would say that was the time that I found out who I was as a wife. But that's not true. I don't think that's true. Because we were just kind of still doing what we were doing. We just had a piece of paper legally binding us together. So nothing really changed in our lives. We didn't move. There were no other significant changes in our lives besides that. And then I go to work and I have this crazy story that happens to me, which I would be happy to tell you at another time. It actually makes me emotional sometimes. And I don't want to do that on the first podcast. I don't want to scare you guys away. But I went to work and I meet this couple and we talk about, children, having children. And I'll spare you the details of that story today. And if you guys want to know, just leave it in the comments down below and I'd be happy to tell you what that story is in the next podcast. But I meet this couple and we talk about children and something changes at 30 years old. And I remember driving home and I called my girlfriend and I was sobbing. I mean, like, couldn't even get words out. And she's like, oh my God, where are you? Are you at the ER? I'm coming. And I was like, no, it's not that. And she's like, well, what is it? And I couldn't even get the words out. I couldn't even say it out loud. And I was like, I think I want to have a baby. And she was like, okay. She had already had 2 kids at this point. So she's like, I'm busy. What are you doing? She was like, okay, so have children. And I was like, but I never wanted kids. And she's like, well, you can change your mind. She's like, just because you never wanted kids up until this point doesn't mean that you can't change your mind. So then I called my husband crying and he was at work. And he picks up the phone and he's frantic. He's like, what does it matter? And I was like, I think I want to have a baby. And he's like, can we talk about this when I get out of work? What? All right. Yeah, sure. Let's do that. But he's like, 5 o'clock, okay? And I'm like, okay. So I go home and he comes home and he's like, so you want to have a baby? And I said, yeah. And he goes, all right. So we have a baby if that's what you really want to do. And I said, well, do you want to do it? And he goes, yeah. And I go, well, wait, you want to have kids? And he said, well, I don't know. He said, yeah. I mean, he's like, I've always dreamed of my life getting married and having children and buying a house and doing that. He's like, that's always been what I thought I was supposed to do and what I wanted to do. He said, and then I met you and I realized that that's not what you have to do. And he's like, I always thought you would change your mind. He's like, I always knew in the back of my head that at some point you would change your mind. And he's like, but if you didn't change your mind, I was so happy to be married to you and live the life that we were living that it didn't matter if we just went off and did other things. He's like, I'm happy to do whatever it is that we do together. So I think this was in January after we got married. So we got married in April, and this was, I think, the January after we got married. And he was like, we are going to Mexico for our honeymoon, and we're going to do that. And he's like, and then if you still want to visit this when we get back, we can start in like March. And I was like, March? What do you mean March? And he goes, listen, this is not a puppy. This is not, and I'm like, and that's where the ADHD hobbies come in. He's like, this isn't just something you could pick up and stop, okay? He's like, this is going to change our lives forever. So I'm going to need you to sit on it. And I was like, all right. So we go to Mexico, we come back, and we have kids. And, and that's that. It wasn't until I had my children that I really found out who I was. And that was one of the most mind-bending experiences, is having my son. Because my world, as I knew it, when I held him in my arms and I was alone with him, changed. Everything. Everything changed. Who I was as a person, who I am now as a mother, who I am as a wife, who I am as a partner, who we are as a couple, who we are as a couple who parents together, who we are as a couple outside of parenting. And you kind of have to figure this all out at once. And at that same time, after I had my son, we bought a house and we moved into the house when my son was like 5 months old. Now we're homeowners. Also, I changed things drastically at my work. Now I'm a stay-at-home mom of a baby. And it's such a weird thing, because if you would have told me that any of these things would have happened 10 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. Because there was not an ice cream cone's chance in hell that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom of 2 children or a wife in a home in the suburbs. What a wild time to be alive. But it was just, it was weird. So then I was finding myself, and I found myself struggling for a long time. And then I got an opportunity to do something for work that I just loved, and I thrived in it, and it was my dream, and it was my passion, and it was all these things. And that lasted from 2016. I actually got that opportunity the same time that I got pregnant with my son. And I was like, I'm getting these 2 gifts at the same time. Like, how lucky am I? Then 2016 came, 2017 came, and then 2018 came. And 2018 was probably one of the hardest years of my life. And I lost that opportunity, that dream job opportunity, because they just didn't have place for me anymore. And, it is what it is. We were going through the process of, my son had speech delay. And I had no idea what autism looked like. I had an idea of what it looked like in my own brain, but I had no idea what it looked like on my son. And people say this saying, and at first when somebody said it to me, I'm like, oh my God, don't say that to me again. But it really is true. If you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. When they were telling me that my son had, some behaviors that exhibited that he might be on the spectrum, I remember it was his developmental therapist. And I remember looking at her and I was like, in my brain, I'm like, get the fuck out of my house. Get out. That's not my son. Because in my brain, I knew exactly what autism looked like. And it looked like a little boy that I knew. And he's in, he's in a group home now. And his needs were so profound. And my son wasn't like that. And I've never had any experience with autism that I understood. My one of my great girlfriends growing up, her brother had Asperger's when they still diagnosed it as Asperger's disease. But I was a child, and he was just one of us. He wasn't any different. He was older than us. I had a crush on him for the longest time. He was such a cutie. But I just, so anyways, so we're going through this process, right? There's a lot of emotions, and it's your baby. You'll die for your baby. And now that we have my baby struggling, it killed me. And I had grief, I had anger, I had a lot of denial. There was denial for a long time because I'm like, this isn't true. It was hard. It was hard to wrap my mind around. And then I lost my dream job, right? And then I used to do a lot of makeup. I entered the Nick's Face Awards, and I entered that, and I made it in, and then I lost that too. And I was still struggling with, the things going on with my son. And then Musically reached out to me on Instagram, and they were like, hey, we really want you to come to this platform. We're going to change it, which is now TikTok. And they're like, well, we're going to push you through the algorithm, but we'd really like you to be one of our beauty influencers. And I was like, that would be great. And then I struck a deal with them. And then they ended up screwing me over. And so I deleted the app, which that's one of my biggest regrets now, because I look at it, and all the people that went viral and did the things in 2020, my life could be much different. We could have a lot of more access to different things with a lot of money. But, my morals at the time took over. And I just deleted the app, and I was like, fuck you guys. And I was just really angry. I was really ready to lash out. I was losing everything all at once. I was losing the idea of who I thought my son was, who he was going to be. I was losing my dreams, my own dreams. I was struggling with being a stay-at-home mom, because if my worth isn't monetary, what is it? I was struggling as a wife, because I was so much of a neurotic helicopter parent. And then in 2019, I had my daughter. So, what'll make this better? Another baby. No, but we wanted to have another baby, and we made that decision. And, that was before my son got diagnosed, and we had my daughter. I am so grateful for my daughter as a human being, for her to just exist on this planet. But I'm also, I'm so grateful for my daughter, because she has unknowingly, and I'll never tell her this, because she's not here to serve a purpose for us by any means. And I don't want anybody to take it that way. But she has single-handedly helped glue this family together. Fuck, I'm going to cry. I don't want to cry. I'm not crying on this episode. Maybe some episodes in the future. But there are a lot of things that she has done just by being her true, authentic self that has really made this family something special. And each of us play our parts, but she is the last piece of this puzzle. And so I get pregnant with her in 2019, and then I'm pregnant again, right? And I'm still being a stay-at-home mom to my son. And we're going through this journey, and we find out that my son hasn't been able to hear for a very long time. So we have to get tubes in his ears because somebody passed him on a hearing test. It wasn't supposed to pass him, and I should have gone with my gut, but I didn't. That's another story for another time, because that shit eats me up every day. But anyways, he's been through 2 rounds of having tubes in his ears, and we got him diagnosed at the beginning of October. He was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and then at the end of October, my daughter was born. And then we were living our lives as, a stay-at-home mom and a husband who works and 2 children. I think my brother-in-law was living here at the time. And I've always wanted to explain this to him. I've never had the opportunity to sit down with him and really talk to him about this. But my brother-in-law was staying here at the time. And then COVID hit. Quarantine scared the shit out of me because I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. How do I do this? I have to homeschool a preschooler with autism. I'm scared. My husband goes out to work every day. I'm scared he's going to be outside. I'm scared of what's happening in the world. I'm scared of all these things. And underneath all of that, I was struggling with regular depression from losing all of my stuff in 2018. Still, because I never dealt with it, right? Struggling with all of the feelings that come along as a parent when you get your children diagnosed with anything, the grieving process that nobody helps you move through. And then on top of that, I had postpartum with my daughter. And my brother-in-law was living here at the time. And that was probably the ugliest section of my parenting journey. I wasn't kind to my children. I wasn't kind to myself. So, and it was great, right? Because he was staying with us, and he was very much a logical, down to earth person that could diffuse any situation. But it was very ugly because I had somebody to witness super ugly moments in my parenting journey. So that was hard. We're getting somewhere. I promise you, we're getting somewhere. We get through 2020. We get through COVID. I start to gain my footing again, right? I start to gain, I start to gain my footing again, and I start to figure it out. I start to figure out who I am as a wife, who I am as a mother. We're starting to cook with grease, okay? And I feel like I could really, get moving here. And then, I was doing all these things. My house was clean. My children and my husband were fed. And everybody's happy, right? Except for me. And I was like, why? They're all happy, right? That's my job. My job is to make sure that they're happy. Why am I not happy? Why does their happiness not make me happy? Isn't this the fulfillment I'm supposed to be getting from this fucking parenting journey, And then I realized it was me. I've been the problem it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me the whole time. Then I had to get out from under guilt and from under feeling selfish to realize that, you need some self-care. It's okay to enjoy things that are not your family or your husband. It's okay to have hobbies. It's okay to just do anything else. My family is important to me, but they don't have to be my personality, right? I still get to be an individual person who exists in this group of people. And it's such a funny thing because I'm trying to teach my kids individuality while not doing that myself. And my husband has always been the most supportive. If I'm like, today I'm going to knit, he'll go buy me 5 things of yarn. If I'm going to start laser cutting, he got me a laser cutter. If I'm going to, whatever it is, he's like, you want it and you're going to do it, then you do it. and you do it the best you can. And I'm like, all right. So I got a tonal, which if you don't know, a tonal is a machine that like hangs on your wall with your arms and you can do strength training. It's amazing. It's one of the best investments I've ever made for my life. And you get a personal trainer, and it's kind of like Peloton in a way. It's $50 a month. You get all these programs and personal trainers and all these things that are, it's incredible. So I started to get on a health journey. And once you start doing one thing for yourself, all these other little things start to follow, right? I'm working out every day. Now I'm showering every day. Now I'm making sure to brush my teeth every day. And if anybody on this podcast or listening to this podcast is like, oh my God, she didn't shower every day. She didn't brush her teeth every day. Let me explain something to you. Very short and sweet. Children and depression. Okay. There were moments where all I could do was get my feet out of bed in the morning. But then I started washing my face every day, taking care of my skincare. Then I'm doing it twice a day. Now I'm like, I'm working out. I should probably eat healthier. And then all these things. And then my girlfriends would ask me, like, let's go out. And I would always be like, no, I can't, sorry. And they're like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. Why? Just no. So I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll go to lunch. I started enjoying that. But then I felt guilty for enjoying that because I wasn't with my kids, which is where I'm supposed to be all the time, 24 hours a day, in their asses. And I started spending money on myself, And then I just started bebopping around, little hobbies. I do all sorts of little hobbies, little circles. So anyways, back to the original point about 52 minutes ago of the journey and why we're here and why we have the podcast is because it is something that's been on my bucket list. It's something that I think will be fun. And it's something that I've just always really wanted to do. And I want to talk to people, and I don't want to cry every episode. I might, I don't know, because I'm a little bitch. We don't know. But, I want to talk to people, and I want to get vulnerable, and I want to get in my feelings, and I want to get therapy. But therapy is expensive. And I'd rather, tell millions of strangers than one licensed stranger. But also, if you need therapy, please go get it, because it is super valuable. I did go to therapy for a while, and I did have a therapist that I really liked. And that is some valuable shit. So now I'm just working on finding things that bring me happiness so that I can enjoy my family in their happiness, because that's important. Because if you're not happy, you can't enjoy those happy moments. And it's like you're in a room, right? And you see everybody around you being happy. And you're like, I know I'm supposed to be happy right now, but I'm not. You have to find your own stuff. You have to do your own stuff. It's important. So your homework lesson for today is to say something nice about yourself. Because that's something I've really been working on, is finding things that I like about myself. Which is funny because like I said earlier, there was nobody that loved me more than me. Not one person on this planet loved me more than me. And then somehow I lost that. And I'm like, how did I lose that? But I want you to say something nice to yourself. And I want you to do something nice to yourself. For yourself. Or to yourself. Whatever you're into. I don't know. But whatever that looks like. What does that look like? Does that look like a face mask? Does that look like drinking a bunch of water? Does that look like putting your feet up and watching your favorite show? Whatever it is that you enjoy, I want you to do that. But anyways, this is the first episode of That's My Opinion. And this, like I said, was a little different than the format that we'll usually do. I do have a list of current events and things that I want to talk about for the next podcast. I do want to get other people on here. I do want to just have conversations. And I do hope that you guys also want to do that with me. Thanks for letting me be here. And thanks for listening. And if you've made it this far, God bless you. Because I don't know if I would make it this far. But I am going to try to put these out weekly, at least once a week. As the show grows, I would like to, do whatever I can whenever I can. Yeah, we're just going to see where this journey takes us. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm BaconBearzz, and that's my opinion.